Welcome to CBN Sports One-on-One, where you'll hear exclusive interviews with some of the biggest names in sports right here on the CBN Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Will Dawson. If you're like most of us and you love sports, but you're tired of the dark side of sports culture, me-focused athletes, or even organizations that bow to an unbiblical belief system, we think you're going to love this podcast. There's no yelling, no sensationalism, just great conversations with athletes and coaches who recognize that their purpose is bigger than their sport. Normally, this is the spot in the podcast where I introduce the guest and say, let's jump right in. This week is a little different, and you'll see why in just a moment. I'm going to start with a question. What would you do if you lost the thing that you loved the most? Would you be angry with God? Well, you wouldn't be alone. The book of Lamentations was written by the prophet Jeremiah in some very trying circumstances. And because we live in this fallen world, we're susceptible to pain, to grief, and even to loss. It's common. Today's podcast focuses on a young man whose future was so bright. His name is Parker Byrd, and Parker was a highly touted middle infielder coming out of high school. One of the best, if not the best, in the state of South Carolina. And Parker had committed to play baseball at ECU, East Carolina University. Just a few days prior to the season started, Parker was in a boating accident that caused such bad damage to his leg, the doctors recommended amputation. His dream was seemingly over. So I asked the question again, how would you respond? We're going to start this interview with Parker's parents, Jeff and Mitzi Byrd, as they recount life before and after the accident and how God blessed their family in the midst of crisis. Let's jump right in. When you think about, so Parker was your first, right?
Right.
And you're in the midst of your career, and when you think about him, and I remember as a dad too, thinking about the first one, you remember everything that happens with them, and then the subsequent kids, you kind of like, I don't remember this as much, but
Right.
When he was growing up as a little boy and playing baseball, what are some of your favorite memories about him, or what stood out to him as his personality?
I think what really stands out to me is how different he was on the baseball field than he was in everyday life, because he was just so quiet and meek and just shy and, just followed rules, never got in trouble. Just the sweetest little kid. And when he would step on the baseball field, he turned into this, not that, he was bad, but he became so competitive, and just his whole persona would change when he would go on the baseball field.
It mattered to him.
It mattered, and he was just so competitive and full of confidence, and, it just really mattered.
I think of Parker is just his desire to win and just to be a leader was such a big difference in the way he normally lived his day-to-day life. I think about times in high school where we were down in games and the coach would call timeout, and Parker would walk to talk to his coach and tell him, hey, coach, I got it, and just go and always get the hit. He never failed, which was different than, he was just so confident in each moment. And, you talk to people who have coached Parker, and they're like, he was the guy we always wanted in the box. He was the guy we always wanted the ball hit to. And, he was just a different kid than the one we raised, for sure, on a baseball field.
You raised him in church, I'm assuming. That's always been part of your life. Why was that important for you guys?
Well, we were raised in church, and our beliefs and our faith was very important. And, ultimately that's what matters most with your kids. And all of this shall pass with baseball and everything else, but they needed the strong foundation of who they belonged to and, what their purpose was for.
We prayed so hard for Parker. We had trouble getting pregnant to begin with, and I can just remember praying one night saying, hey, God, if you give us a baby, we'll bring him to you, and we'll raise him in church. And he would know who you are. And, I think that was just a commitment we made to God pretty early on that, if you bless us with a child, that he would know you. And, we've tried to do that with each of our kids. His dream was always to play pro baseball, but, you think about the percentage of people who make it as a pro is very small, but the people who stand before God one day is 100%. And, that's the thing that we, each and every day when we're raising our children, it's like, hey, let's make sure we know who he is.
How early on did you realize he's pretty good? He's actually better than a lot of the other kids. When did you think maybe, he's got a path in baseball? Really early.
I mean, he had an older cousin who was 3 years older than him. And when Parker was like 3 or 4, his cousin was already playing on this little team, and Parker could hit just as well as the 5, 6, 7-year-old kids. And, he was able to play on the tribal team when he was 5. And the very first tournament he hit 9th, played right field, and by the second tournament he was playing second base and hitting in the 2-hole. And, he was always, just like we said earlier, just different on the field than he was day to day. And he just was always confident. We knew pretty early on that we didn't know how far he would go in it, but we know that he was going to play baseball for a very long time. How much did you enjoy as a mom sitting in the stands when he's in middle school, high school, watching his games?
Oh, I loved it. It was it's like you look forward to like the whole week, what day we have games, and
your lives really orient itself.
All of our lives. And I mean, we have 2 other children, and they were involved in their things too, but our whole family pretty much as a unit, like we say, our girls were raised on a baseball field because we were at a baseball field all the time. It was some of our greatest memories.
You guys are a very tight-knit family, so there was no sibling rivalry or jealousy that Parker was taking some of the attention when it came to his baseball? It's funny to think that Parker's dream of playing collegiate professional baseball almost became some of our family's dream because, our girls, when Parker was injured, they wanted to move because they wanted to make sure Parker's dream was still fulfilled. And they were going to support him any way possible. And they were that way growing up. They were always there at games with him. They were always his biggest supporters. Our youngest daughter, who half the time was never paying attention to the game, when she was 2 or 3, you could always hear her go, "Come on, PB," and that's what she called Parker. And then she would go back to coloring and doing whatever. But pretty early on, they supported him in every way. He committed to ECU, at least verbally committed to ECU, really early on. He did. Is that right? He committed when he was 14 years old. He hadn't even played a high school baseball game yet. He played with the South Charlotte Panthers, which is a pretty big organization. Whit Merrifield, who was the AL hit leader a few years ago, played in the same organization. And, he played down in Florida his freshman year, had a really good tournament. The Panthers won the tournament. So a lot of the kids started getting on the college scouting radar. And Parker knew pretty early on he wanted to go to East Carolina. He loved Coach Godwin. He loved the program here. And he would go to games that he was not even playing in wearing ECU stuff. And his travel coach would say, "Parker, you don't need to wear so much ECU stuff because there's other colleges looking at you." He said, "I know where I want to go. And that's where I want to play baseball." After that big tournament, he was talking to ECU pretty heavily, talking to a few other schools. But on November 12th of 2018, Coach Godwin offered him a baseball scholarship, and he committed on the spot. He knew from that moment that's where he was going to play, and he never wavered from coming here. It's pretty impressive because as a dad of a kid who played NAIA football, that whole, hey, these schools are courting my son, that whole process, and for a lot of kids, that's a lot of fun. Right. That attention coming from different areas, but it seems like he wasn't interested in that at all.
No, he wasn't interested. He talked to a few schools because, you have to keep at that so early, you have to keep some of your options open, but he knew where he wanted to go, and he knew if the opportunity came, that's where he was going. And so to me, it was kind of nerve-wracking. You would go to these tournaments and all these college coaches were there. And even afterwards, like even after he committed, I would still kind of get nervous when I would see him, even though he had committed. I'm like, you still have to perform. They're still watching you. But I feel like looking back, it was a huge blessing to go ahead and commit, because I watched some of the other kids for 4 years. It's just a long process. And so I was very thankful.
There are a lot of moments throughout your life and in your kids' lives that you remember. Maybe they're not as significant as others, but one would be in February when it's National Signing Day and you go to the school and the coach is there and you sit down at a table and they sign their letter of intent, I guess, to play for ECU. Did you guys go through that whole thing?
Yeah, we did. He wanted to do it on his high school baseball field. He did it on home plate and, surrounded by his family and his teammates, and, sitting there with his high school baseball hat and his college baseball hat, and, just thinking of the 4 years that we waited, because he committed so early, it felt like he was committed to ECU forever.
Right.
And then for that day, finally, to be able to send that letter of intent in, to know that the dream was now a reality.
And hearing about Parker a little bit, he probably was like, yeah, of course. I mean, come on, let's go. Let's get this thing going. It's been 4 years. So in July of that year, he is out on a boat. Was he out on the friend's boat? How often did he go out on the water?
He never went out on the water like during that summer. They were only here for one session of summer school. Coach Godwin wants all the freshmen to come in, and it just gets you acclimated to workouts and going to class and the university where stuff is, versus coming in the fall with everyone and all of that being shoved at you. So they were only here for a few weeks, and he had a teammate that kind of came in later that was a walk-on, and his family had a river house nearby about 40 minutes away, and he had been asking pretty much every weekend, hey, let's go out. And at that time, Parker was coming home almost every weekend, so he never did, but it was the last weekend of the summer school. So 4 teammates finally decided, okay, yeah, we'll go out. So they went to the river house like that Friday, and went tubing, had a great time, spent the night, did it again the next day, and that's when it happened.
And he wasn't even supposed to stay that Saturday, and one of his teammates was supposed to help a couple move, and they called him early Saturday morning and said, hey, we don't need you today. And so they ended up talking that kid and Parker into staying because Parker was going to bring him back. And so he wasn't even supposed to be out on the river that day. And Mitzi and I had just went to Yellowstone for a few days. All the kids had committed to either camps or going to the beach with friends, and Parker was at school, and we went to Yellowstone, and we were coming back from Yellowstone, and I had just read about the Toronto Blue Jays first base coach who lost his daughter on right around July 4th of that same July. Same deal. I was out on the boat, was tubing, and the propeller hit her, and she died. And that day that they went out, Parker FaceTimes me around 12:30, and we're both talking to him and say, hey guys, when you approach the boat today, make sure the motor's cut off. And all the kids heard me say this, except for the kid that was driving the boat. And so Parker's out on the tube that day, and he had fallen off the tube, and he was swimming back to the boat. And when he got close to the boat got put in reverse, and the propeller hit both of his legs and his left hand, but the propeller cut one of his main arteries in his right leg. And he eventually lost his leg 12 days after the event. And that's when it happened.
What do you remember about getting the phone call? Mitzi, I'll start with you the day, because you're on your way back and you're just trying to get back into normalcy probably.
Right. We're at home, and we're just, trying to unpack and get things straightened up. I was helping our youngest daughter clean her room, and His girlfriend at the time actually called Jeff and said, Jeff, you have to get to Greenville. There's been an accident. Parker's been ran over by the boat, and I think he's dying. They're flying him to Greenville. And so we're 2.5 hours away at the time. And Jeff had actually had left to go. We were cleaning out closets, and we had some stuff to take to donate. And he comes right back and runs into the house and says, Mitzi, we have to go. Parker's been hit by the boat. We got to go. And at the time, I just remember like almost going blank. Like, we just talked to him. Like, what do you mean? And you just kind of go in that like frozen mode. Like, what? What's like, we weren't dressed for the day. I mean, I was about to go work out. I had workout clothes on, and you're just in panic. You just run. And we ran to the car and grabbed our other daughter and had, both our kids, and just drove frantically to Greenville. He was driving crazy, 110 miles an hour down I-95. And it was really scary because you just don't know. There's like so much uncertainty about what had happened. We were trying to get up with all the kids that were on the boat, like what happened, how bad is it? We were getting different stories from each kid, and we both have medical backgrounds, and I knew that if they were flying him like from 45 minutes away, that it was bad. Like, typically that's an ambulance ride, that's not a helicopter ride. So I knew realistically that it had to be bad in order for that to happen. But, we were hoping and praying that, one of his teammates was like, oh, it's just some cuts on the back of his leg. I mean, I think he's going to be fine. And so we were kind of clinging on to that. But deep down, you knew that probably wasn't the case.
As a parent, you play through those scenarios in your mind, getting a phone call, and I know you guys probably the same way, just thinking about the possibility of getting a call someday,
right.
something happening. What you were given was kind of worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they really dropped a bomb on you, and I'm sure that there was probably a pit in your stomach when you heard that.
Yeah, I mean, our daughter was out the other night, and she calls me at 6 o'clock. This was 3 days ago. And, usually she calls her mom. Like, Grayson's Mitzi's baby. Like, she loves her mom, and she calls me, but they're on the same river that Parker got hit on. And she calls me, and she said, Dad. And as soon as she said, Dad, it triggered it all over again, like thinking, something was wrong. And, I don't know if I will ever get over hearing the words, Parker's dying. And I'm driving so hard down 95 because, I'm like, I got to get there before he dies. And, they're all in the car, like, slow down. But all I could think about, like, what if I don't make it? And it's just something, that I would probably never shake. But
so when you get to the hospital then, and you're just hoping that that he's alive.
Right.
Did you speak with a surgeon or what happened there?
No, he was in surgery when we got there. We made it in, it typically takes 2.5 hours, and I think we made it hour and 45 minutes maybe.
And that's with a blown tire. Like, I blew my tire because I was riding on the side of the road so much, passing cars, that I blew a tire probably 40 minutes out, and it was 4 o'clock on a Saturday, and she's like, we're never going to be able to get there. And she looks up on her phone, tire shops, and 800 feet from where we were was a Hispanic tire shop, and they didn't speak English and we didn't speak Spanish, but they knew that we were in trouble. and they had one tire in the shop that fit my car, and they put it on my car within 3 or 4 minutes. And I mean, it was a very slick tire, but we're back on the road and make it to Greenville in 1 hour and 40 minutes.
Yeah, and he's in surgery at the time, and so we didn't know anything for hours. I think
When we get here, because he didn't have an adult with him, they had him under an alias. So for a while, we couldn't even find where he was. And when we finally found his location, they took us to a waiting room, and we were there probably 5 hours before we were ever given an update. And, we were still kind of hanging on to some of his teammates telling us, oh, the wounds aren't that bad. And, I knew Parker's first thoughts were going to be baseball. And, the surgeon comes out, or the surgeons, there were 3 that come out. And the first question I asked him after they told us the bleeding had stopped was, is he going to be able to play baseball? Because I knew that's what mattered most to Parker. And the vascular surgeon looked at me and said, he's alive. And that's all I can tell you right now. And that was when we realized that how bad it really was.
yeah, like, oh, this is bad. This is really bad.
On your way there, were you talking to God?
We pretty much prayed the whole way there. I mean, I think the whole way when we were just, please God be with him, please God save him, I can just remember just nonstop, just praying that he was alive.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole way. In between calls and then calling family, telling them what's happening, pray,
Is that something that you all pray together normally, out loud together? It may be a personal question, but I know sometimes it's a difficult thing to do, but obviously in this situation is very different.
We definitely have prayed together, through our marriage. A lot of times we pray alone, sometimes we pray together, and it's one of those things that we're very conscientious now of making sure that we always pray together. And I mean, definitely that day we prayed together, and his prayers definitely been part of our marriage life for sure.
So he's in surgery, you find out that he's at least alive, but then there's still this, maybe it won't be okay, I don't know. And then how long, what was the period of time before you got the assurance that he's going to be okay?
So the first surgery, they come back and they say the bleeding stopped. And so he has surgery, not the next day, but the following day. And they were looking for the sciatic nerve because they couldn't find it on the initial surgery. And so the plastic surgeon comes in and says, hey, I found a sciatic nerve, it's intact. The muscles are pretty shredded, but I think with time, we can get them back put together. If I can get him back to 80%, his words, if I can get him back to 80%, it would be a home run. And Parker went into baseball mode at that moment because he's the biggest competitor you ever met. And I'm talking to the doctor, and I hear him say to his mom, obviously, he doesn't know who I am. Because Parker knew that 80% was not good enough, and that he would never settle for anything less than giving his best and being at 100%. And so surgery after surgery happened for the first 8 days, and things were going well. We thought everything was going to be fine. The surgeon told us that Parker's muscles were shredded all the way to the sciatic nerve, but the propeller stopped 1 millimeter from his sciatic nerve, and if it had hit that nerve, he would have lost his leg instantaneously. That there would have been no saving his leg. So, we thought, hey, there's God performing another miracle. And August 2nd comes, and she had to stay with him that night, and we would always exchange in the hallway because of COVID rules. We couldn't always be together. And she said, Parker's foot's really cold and his foot's really blue. And, I think we kind of both knew then that there was not great blood flow to his foot. And he was scheduled for surgery that morning. And we thought it was just going to be another surgery he was having to put muscles back together, clean the wound out. And we get a phone call saying, hey, we need to see you right away. And the vascular surgeon who had been operating on him was in another surgery, so another surgeon was filling in, and they had taken him out of the OR that he was in and moved into this vascular hospital that's still on the same campus, but he just didn't have any blood flow to his foot. And they put a catheter in trying to increase the blood flow back to his foot. And we did that for a couple of days. And, that's when, we're not very public people when it comes to social media, but, we did rely on prayer. I can just remember saying to Mitzi, can you just ask for prayer? We need for God to save his foot. And, and that became everybody's prayer. It was, blood flow would be restored. And August 4th comes, and I had to stay with him that night. And it had just been a very long night, and he was just in lots of pain. And the surgeon comes in on August 4th morning and says to him, Parker, I don't think we're going to be able to save your leg. And you have two choices. And, one, you could keep doing what we're doing and see if the blood flow comes back, but the medicine's not working, and you're going to end up with infection, and your kidneys are going to shut down, and you're probably going to pulmonary failure or lung failure, and you probably will not live, or we could amputate your leg. And Parker said, I don't have a choice. Let's amputate the leg because I want to live. And I called Mitzi right away, and we couldn't, because he was in ICU, both be there, and they made an exception, and she was there within 30 minutes. And Parker cried for 30 minutes. He probably cried maybe for 15 minutes. And the second surgeon came in, and by that point, Parker had already accepted his fate. That he had moved on. Mentally, he was like, this is what needs to be done. And later that afternoon, he had his leg amputated.
When you get to the hospital, he's in surgery. And so when was the first moment that you saw him, that he was awake and that he recognized you being in the hospital? And what was it like kind of relaying to him what had happened?
We saw him that night, after it was late. It was probably maybe 10, 11, maybe even later that night. And he was awake from surgery, and he looked extremely pale. He had lost a ton of blood. And his first words was to us that he was sorry.
I'm sorry.
Why? Why were those his words?
I think probably because, he never wants to disappoint you, and he never wants to cause problems. And he knew, not that it was his fault that had even happened, but we had just been talking to them, boat safety, be careful, the water's, is dangerous. And he was doing everything they were just riding on a tube. He wasn't in control of the boat or the driver or anything, but I'm sure he just didn't want for us to be disappointed in a situation, or I don't know that he understood the severity of it at that time. He knew that his legs had been cut. He'll tell you that he never looked down at it, so he didn't know. But he knew that they had been hurt, at least, and that this was going to somehow delay his baseball. And I'm thinking that he just didn't want us upset. So he tells us he's sorry, and we're like, it's okay. You're still here. And I'm not really sure how long it took him to realize, oh, okay, this is probably the first dressing change when the plastic surgeon came in a few days later, I guess, to change the dressing, because that's typically done in surgery. So we never really saw it. And he took photos of it. And he was like, you want to see? I don't think, we knew that it was bad, but we had not seen it because it was covered. And when we come back in, he said, do you want to see my leg? And he showed us, and we were like, oh, wow, okay. So, but that was his initial response was, I'm sorry.
He was thinking about you guys.
Yeah.
Not thinking about himself.
I mean, that's, when we tell you that's who Parker was, like he's always put everyone before him. And, he just didn't want us to be upset with him or us to, be disappointed that he did something wrong.
You had prayed, God, save his leg, and you're hoping for a miracle. God doesn't answer the prayer that way. What was your response? I mean, did it shake your faith at all, or what was going through your mind at the time?
I think for me, your initial response is just devastation. Like, okay, this didn't get answered. Why did it not get answered? I just kept, talking to God, like, this kid has worked so hard, like truly since he was old enough to walk. Like this has been his dream. And he is just days away from it actually happening. And like everything was lining up for him. He had just got his number, like, his number 16 his entire life. And he didn't have it initially when he came, but he had just got his number. He had just designed his glove, like everything was falling right in line with him. He was a shortstop, and the shortstop for ECU had just got drafted. So he was in a good standing to compete for that position as a freshman. And I just kind of remember thinking, really, God, like, you're going to take this from him now? Like at this pivotal moment in his life, this is what you're doing. And, I kind of wrestled with that for a while. But, I just finally came to the realization that God always knew that this was going to happen, and that, God loved him first. And this was somehow going to be part of his story. And I had just to have faith in that, God has a plan for him, and his plan might not have been my plan, but his plan's going to be bigger than what I could dream of it happening. And maybe he was never designed to play shortstop at ECU, like maybe something else. And I finally had to just let it go to him. And I said, whatever your purpose is behind this, like, it has to be bigger. It has to be bigger than what we had dreamed of. So I'm just giving it to you. And I had to just have faith in that.
That's well said. Jeff, what about yours?
I don't think I'll let it go that easy. Mitzi definitely, even pretty early on with Parker in baseball, playing pro baseball was never Mitzi's dream for Parker, because she's like, I just want to be the best godly father or godly husband playing professional sports. And, to her, that was more important than, him playing shortstop for the Atlanta Braves or whoever he was, drafted by. But, Parker and I went to the batting cage every single day of his life, and we were to a baseball field. And, I watched many days and hours of him dreaming a dream. And he was such a good kid. He never went out. He never caused trouble. He was just a really good kid. And, I was pretty angry, with God. Because I'm like, this kid is so good. And this is his reward. And I just remember one night just thinking about Jesus hanging on the cross. And that's God's son. And, and I've said this 1,000 times, like, if Jesus can hang on a cross and that's God's son, I cannot expect things to not happen to us. And, that was the moment I realized whatever God's plan is, we're going to show glory and hope in it. And, I still fight it some days. But we do know that pretty early on that God was using Parker for something special. So it's just hard sometimes to let dreams die. And, but, sometimes God's no, I read it today, sometimes God's no is not a rejection, but a redirection. And I truly feel that. God redirected our life and Parker's life based on what he needs Parker to do.
Wow, that's powerful. So we'll take probably a long period of time, a brutal period of time, and that was getting from the wheelchair, like you said, to the crutch, that whole rehab part of time, and him getting used to his new leg. How difficult was it for him? How difficult was it for you to watch him go through that?
We had to give Parker some purpose in keeping his mental health and his drive alive. And I just remember watching ESPN had just released the Captain series about Derek Jeter through their ESPN series, and just trying to watch that with Parker. And I just remembered he was not interested in it. And I think the next night Mitzi stayed with him, and he says to her, "Mom, I don't think I'm ever going to play baseball again." And she says to him, "Why not?" And he says to her, "There's never been a Division I baseball player who's played with a prosthetic." And she said, "Somebody has to be the first." That was all it took for Parker to realize, hey, okay, my dream's not dead, but my road's a little bit different. And so he hung on to those words. And as soon as he came home from the hospital the very next day, he said, "Can we go to the batting cage?" And he's in a wheelchair. His leg's amputated and it's so wrapped up, you don't even recognize it's a leg. And we just go to the batting cage and we turn the machine on, and he sits there with a bat on his shoulder in a wheelchair and watches balls go by for 15 minutes. He doesn't swing the bat, just watching balls. And the next day he has to go back again, and the next day he has to go back again. And eventually he got to a walker, and he would go to the cage and he would hit with his front hand, and because he was not able to rotate yet, and this goes on for weeks, and then months. He gets better. He's now on crutches, and he's doing front hand drills, back hand drills. I'm driving back and forth 5 hours a day, and he's going to the cage with his mom. She can flip balls to him some days if I'm on call, or some of his friends from back home would take his sister, would go put balls on the tee. It became a very team effort to just keep this drive going. And 4 months after his amputation, he gets fitted for a prosthetic. And of course, that night we go to the batting cage for the first time with 2 legs again. And just to be able to see him swing with 2 hands again, it was almost like watching him walk for the very first time as a baby. And, you're just so proud. And it's just been a very slow progression. Looking back, I guess it wasn't even that slow, but every single day was just like a progression and getting better to where he is now.
I just know that, whether it would ever happen or not, I didn't know. No one knew, but Parker needs a goal. Parker's always has to strive for something better. And once he reaches that, he has to top that. And I knew that if he didn't have a goal, we would lose him in a very dark space. And I couldn't let that happen. So I think God just gave me the right words at that moment. I didn't know it would be such a turning point for him. I didn't, it just came out really. But when he said, Mom, I don't think that I'm ever going to play baseball again. And I was thinking, oh gosh, we can't go down this road right now in the hospital and lose him. And I said, why not, Parker? And he said, well, I'm missing a leg. I'm going to be an amputee. Amputees don't play baseball. No one's done it. And I said, well, if no one's done it, then someone has to do it. There always has to be a first, and there always has to be records, and there will always be someone to break a record. And if it hasn't happened, then that needs to be your goal. And he just kind of shook his head and got very quiet. You can tell he went into his thinking. He's very quiet in the hospital. And there was a period that we thought he was going to lose his knee. His knee was dead, and we were told many times that they couldn't amputate above the knee initially because the muscles were still so shredded that they couldn't make a flap. So they were waiting for his thigh muscles to heal before they could amputate above the knee. And realistically, we knew without a knee, it was going to be really hard because your mobility is not nearly as good. It takes too much energy to try to walk, and you have to get a mechanical knee. And so that was tough for a little bit, thinking, how are we going to keep him here, knowing he's not going to have a knee. But then we had two different surgeons tell us that the bones were dead and it would have to be eventually amputated. And I just put many prayer requests every day out. Please pray for blood flow back to the knee. We need his knee. And little by little, the blood came back to his bones and all of the tissue. And we even saw the photos. It was completely black, like dead, and it all came back. So, I just told Parker, I was like, see, that's a miracle. God restored blood to your knee. He turned black tissue back, pink and red, and you're going to get your knee. And I just knew he has to have a goal.
Yeah, he's an achiever
Yeah.
for sure. So we will fast forward then to this season when he's got his leg, he's in uniform, which is in and of itself just an unbelievable feat for him to actually just be in the dugout, right? But then that night that everybody has seen around the world where he goes up to bat, tell me the emotions that are going on inside your heart and inside your mind.
Oh my gosh. That was, well, first of all, you're so proud. You're so thankful. Like it's actually happened. You've seen the work put in, and, there's tons of work behind the scenes. And, I watched him warming up one time, and he took several steps backwards. And I almost burst in tears just seeing that, because I knew that took probably 3 weeks in physical therapy for him to be able to do that one motion. And so the amount of work that went into it, and to see him work so hard to get there and for it to actually be happening, and to see everyone, like this town, this college, our family and friends, everyone has been so supportive, so believing in him. And to see everybody just erupt when he came out, and it was pretty great. And then you're nervous because then you're like, oh, please get a hit. Everyone's watching. This is going to go everywhere. But
it was great because both of you guys were on that video, and you can see you kind of looking at each other, just trying to process the whole thing. So
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing.
We were higher up in the stands, and the guy I practice with, kid is the creative content person for East Carolina, and he comes and sits beside us, and he said he's talking, and he gets a phone call, and he said, we want y'all to get lower down if you could. I said, what's up? He said, Parker's warming up to hit. And I just burst into tears. I'm like, Parker's about to hit, and we go to the bottom so we can see him hit better because we're higher up. But he comes out of a dugout, and the crowd goes crazy. He just takes one step out, and he gets in the box, and then I kind of go back into dad mode, coach mode, and like my emotions kind of go away. All I'm at that moment is, don't strike out, and it's always funny, ever since he's been little, if he should swing, my body jerks like he should swing too. And I almost went back into that same motion of like being in the box with him. And, when ball four comes and he runs at first base, I think it's like, okay, the motion came back and like, that just happened. And, it's something that you never thought would happen again happened. And, you could just see from the very first time he sat in a wheelchair to that moment, running to first base, that you'd never one thought he was going to walk again. To see him walk to first base was a miracle.
What is Parker's story as we kind of wrap here? What does Parker's story tell you about God's faithfulness?
I feel like Parker's story shows us that, first of all, God never leaves us. He's always with us. Even when you feel that he's not there and you feel alone, he's still there. He's still working. He's carrying you through it. And even when you think it's the absolute worst thing that could ever happen, God is rearranging it to use you and use your glory, use it for his glory. You would never want that to happen to your child, but then it happens and you see the difference they're making in other people's lives, and people being inspired by him, and you just have to step back and think, okay, you've really turning this around. Your plans are bigger than anything that I could imagine for him. So he's always there.
The day Parker lost his leg was August 4th, and back home they had scheduled a prayer vigil that night. And it was really to have a prayer vigil for his leg to be saved, but it ended up being the same day his leg ended up being amputated. And 9 people that night gave their life to God. And without Parker's accident, those 9 people may never enter the kingdom of heaven. And it was the first time I thought, okay, there's something bigger than just a baseball game, a baseball player. And then a guy that Parker played baseball with, his dad, was really close to Parker and hadn't prayed in over 20 years. And he texts me one day and he says, I'm praying. And he texts me a few days later, he's like, I've read my Bible, so I'm praying for Parker. And then he gives his life to God. And, I tell Parker, I said, hey, Toby gave his life to God. And I just never forget Parker saying, if it took me to lose my leg for Toby to see the gates of heaven, it was worth it. And so, I mean, those are things that just God's faithfulness through this all is amazing. This kid comes to my office, very recently, was born without his right lower leg. And they live 40 minutes away, and I walk into the room and see this kid's missing his leg. And I say to the parents, just introduce myself, start talking, and they're like, we're here because we know Parker's story, and we're here because we want hope from you because of Parker. And, those stories, those moments weren't written by any human, but by God. And without Parker losing his leg, I'm not there for that family. They're without hope. Our suffering, is for His glory, and it produces so much hope in people that, what Parker's able to do, he has not let words define him. He has not let the word can or no or impossible even mean anything to him. And we know that, God is behind those things for him. So,
if you're a parent, you know the pain of just imagining your child going through something as horrific as Parker's accident. And yet, Jeff and Mitzi say they were blessed through it. Now let's switch gears and hear from this remarkable and inspirational young man himself, Parker Byrd.
Let's talk about 8-year-old Parker Byrd. And even younger, your dad talks about you being 3-4 years old and being ahead of your time. How much did you love baseball when you were a kid?
I think it was really my life at that time. I think every day Dad got home from work, and that's the first thing I asked was if we could go to the field. And I think it actually started in our backyard, and we would hit one way, the short way of our backyard, and then turn around and hit the long way once I started hitting it over the wall, and then eventually hit it into the pool. And they're like, hey, I think it's time to go to a field. And I think I would wear baseball players' jerseys, and I would do the national anthem, kind of go all out for it. So I think it was just my life, and I was a huge Brian McCann fan, huge Braves guy. So I was definitely playing catcher a lot.
When you thinking about being Brian McCann or whoever, how big was that dream, being able to play in the big leagues someday to you?
I mean, it was huge. I think that's just every kid's goal that just loves baseball as much as I did. It's what I did every weekend, every day, and just made that next step, that'd be college or MLB, I was looking forward to it, and that's all I've ever dreamed of.
You were confident that was going to happen too, right?
Yeah, it was definitely on a promising path. I committed from a very early age, 9th grade, which is kind of unheard of a little bit, and I think it was before I even played a high school game. So it was definitely in the right direction. But
why was ECU the school that you knew you were going to go to, and you really didn't want to hear? You didn't really hear the pitches from other coaches.
Yeah, I would say just the culture here. The coaching staff's phenomenal. The consistency, how good they are each and every year. I mean, you see teams across the country, and they're good for 1 year and kind of have a down year the next year. But here at ECU, I mean, we're a top 15 team every single year, which is really unheard of in college baseball. So just the consistency, the atmosphere here, the fan base is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, you'll see it tomorrow at the regional. It's going to be 6,000 plus on a 1 p.m. game on a Friday. So, I mean, just fan base and coaches, really.
8th, 9th, 10th grade, 11th grade, you're going to ECU baseball games, sporting the ECU gear. How excited were you to get to be a part of that?
I was really excited. I mean, because I committed so early on, I had something to look forward to for a very long time. So I was just looking forward to coming to summer school here before my freshman year. And I think I was marked on my calendar for a very long time. But just getting to represent ECU even before I was even here was really cool. And just kind of knowing that everything I do is being watched.
growing up as a kid, part of your identity, a large portion of that identity was being a baseball player. And then you also had the identity of being raised in a Christian home too. When you think back about your faith then as a kid, what did it mean to you?
I would say that it was definitely a big question mark. It was definitely our firm foundation as a family, but I didn't on my own dig into the word like I should have. But my parents did a great job of just taking me and my sisters to church. We were traveling a lot because of baseball, so it was kind of hard to go on Sundays, but we would go on weekdays, very late at night sometimes. Because we would go about 30 minutes away to church. But I mean, it was kind of a big question mark because I didn't dive into it on my own. I didn't really understand fully of what like faith was, and I think as I got older, I kind of understood like, hey, this is what life is really about.
You signed your letter of intent to get ready to go to ECU. Your parents said you signed it over home plate, which is cool.
Yeah.
And then you're in that summer before it really becoming the dream becoming real for you. And then that day happens when you're out on the lake. Do you remember waking up that morning, the thoughts that you had that morning? Do you remember anything about that day leading up to the event?
Oh yeah, I remember everything. I think we were just in Bath, and I was supposed to come back to Greenville to help one of my friends. He was going to help an elderly couple move some furniture. I told him, hey, I'd take you back. I don't really care to be here 2 days, but just happy to be with my friends, and just thought I was going to have a great day.
You were on a tube, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And then things went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about the moment that happened?
Yeah, so me and one of my teammates, Dixon Williams, got on the tube first that day. Like I said, we weren't even supposed to go out that day. I was supposed to come back to Greenville, but the guys had kind of convinced me to stay in town and go tubing with them like we did the previous day. So me and Dixon got on tube first. First ride went great. I think we're on for about 20 minutes or so, and we both ended up falling off, and we were like, hey, we had a great time. Let's get back on. And the driver was like, hey, I'm going to try to throw you guys off a little bit quicker this time, so I'm going to go a little bit more crazier. And we're like, okay, sounds good. So when he started up, he was definitely went a lot faster than what we were expecting. And Dixon ended up falling off the tube before I did. And then the driver turned the boat, and the tube hit a wake. I went way up in the air, and I'm terrified of heights. So I just kind of let go and hit the water really hard. And me and Dixon both agreed just to go back to the boat because we had enough for the time being. And so I was swimming back to the boat, and Dixon was pretty far behind me. And I was kind of using the rope from the tube to help guide myself in. And as I got within 10 yards or so, the driver put the boat in reverse, or it was knocked into reverse somehow, and essentially ended up running me over. And the propellers hit both of my legs and my left hand as well. And then the guy I was supposed to take back home, Miles, he jumped in immediately because he had a friend from back home in Florida die of a boating accident. So he knew that getting me help was very urgent. So him and Dixon helped guide me back to the boat. They pulled me onto the boat, and all the guys on the boat were tying tourniquets around my legs with their shirts the best they could while waving down other boats. Well, the first boat stopped, and we addressed the situation to them, and they were like, hey, we have kids on the boat. We can't really help, but here's a first aid kit. Well, this isn't really going to help right now. It's far from just needing a Band-Aid. So they continued waving down other boats, and the second boat stopped, and on that boat was two couples. And the only reason they were there at that time was because one of the couple had gotten into an argument, and they're like, hey, can you just take me back? We're kind of done for the day. So on their way back, they saw us, and they stopped. We addressed the situation to them. They agreed to help. And so they were getting me transported to their boat. And on that boat, one of the ladies was actually a nurse. So there she was tying more tourniquets around my legs with rope that they had on their boat while they were taking me to the marina where there was an ambulance waiting on me. And then the ambulance took me to the local hospital in Washington where there was a helicopter waiting on me. And then they airlifted me from Washington Hospital to ECU Health here in Greenville.
That's a lot of detail. Do you remember all that?
I do, yeah. So I was like very hyper aware, just because I kept telling myself, like, Parker, stay awake, because if you end up passing out or falling asleep, like, I don't know if you'll ever wake up again. You'll probably end up dying. So I just kept telling myself 1% inch by inch, not yard by yard, which is the Brian Kane mental performance that we were doing at ECU at the time. So just taking it little and piece by piece.
You had to have been at least concerned, right?
Definitely.
I mean, you had to have been scared.
Definitely. Yeah, it was definitely a lot of uncertainty. I didn't really look down at my legs. I was honestly really focusing on my hand. I was like, dang it, that looks weird. But yeah, I didn't really know what was going on. I heard the doctors kind of talking, or the nurses, the flight nurses talking on the helicopter, and but I tried to just kind of tone it out and just kind of stay in the moment and just breathe and honestly stay awake.
So when they put you out was when they were taking you into surgery?
Correct. Yeah. So they rushed me immediately into surgery in the trauma unit, and they kind of just wheeled me in there. And first thing they did, of course, was a COVID test, and then they put me under. And so after that, I think the only thing I really remember was the COVID test, and then after that, it's just asleep.
What was the first thing that you remember when you woke up?
Probably seeing my parents briefly, honestly. I remember talking to my grandparents, telling them to stay in Alaska. But besides that, it was the first couple weeks were kind of a blur.
Your parents said the first thing that you said to them when you woke up was you were sorry.
Yeah.
What was that about?
I honestly don't even know. Just because I guess I felt guilty because they had called me like right before I went out that day and told me like, hey, stay away from the propeller, because we had just heard a story of this baseball coach for the Toronto Blue Jays, the first base coach. His daughter had just died in a boating accident. So dad just had read that in an article and was kind of telling me about it. And they kind of had a weird feeling. They're not really the helicopter parents, but they were trying to like get us not to go out that day. And I was like, Mom, Dad, like, we're going to be okay. Like, we kind of know what to do. And so I honestly just kind of probably felt guilty.
What point did you think to yourself, the sport that I love, who I am, my identity being a baseball player could be over?
I would say maybe in the beginning. I realized that it was pretty severe. But then the doctors were telling us, like, hey, his legs are going to be okay. Just with some extensive rehab, he'll get back onto the field. So then that doubt kind of went away. But then after my amputation, I just kind of realized, like, hey, nobody's ever done this. This is kind of uncharted waters. So I would definitely say that doubt definitely creeped back in after my amputation.
There was a period of time before when they gave you the news that you have two choices, and that's basically have your leg amputated or face death, possibly. What was going through your mind during that part?
I just want to keep living. I think he came in very early that morning and said, hey, like, we can either continue on this medicine that we have you on right now, and which isn't working at all, and you'll end up dying, or we can just amputate your right lower extremity. And I was like, hey, I want to keep living a life, and baseball is what I do, but that's not my life. I know that's what I lived for, but it's bigger than baseball at that moment. I just want to keep living, and I knew that my story wasn't over.
You're a very matter-of-fact person. Like, things are the way they are. You have a very positive attitude. That's awesome, man. It makes you the leader that you are, I'm sure, around other guys, and that stuff's infectious. But when you're laying in the hospital bed at some point during that time, because you were there, how long were you there?
I was there for 4 weeks.
That's a long time to think about what's happening. Did you think about your faith? Did you think about, I mean, was there at any point that you thought, this is terrible?
Yeah, definitely, because, I mean, obviously everybody has a plan for themselves, and when your plan kind of hits a fan and it turns into God's plan, it's definitely a lot of questions, because you're like, well, God, why am I here? What are you doing? But eventually his plan's always greater than yours, and it took a while to realize that, and we kind of leaned on the Bible verse Jeremiah 29:11, like we were just talking about with the wristbands. People made a wristband for me, put it on there, and it's just honestly what we we leaned on, basically just saying that he has a plan to prosper us and not to harm us, and plans for us to have a hope in the future. So I think that's really what we leaned on, is trusting in his plan, even though we didn't know what the outcome was going to be. But definitely on the outside of kind of looking back into it, you can definitely tell that his plan is always greater, and that even though you had to go through some difficult times, he was still working.
Again, your confidence is through the roof, and you meet challenges, and you're like, give me the next thing. I'm going to go for it. Was there a time when you actually thought to yourself, Jeremiah 29:11, no matter what happens, maybe I won't play baseball again, but that'll be okay?
Definitely. I mean, I was still very confident that I was going to get back onto the field, but still there was a lot of doubt, like, how am I going to do this? But just knowing that if you just work hard in life, anything is possible, as long as you just trust in his plan. But there definitely was some time in there where like, how am I going to do this? But I mean, as long as you keep on, then everything will work out the way it should.
You had a period of time with the rehab when you get your prosthetic for the first time. You're in a wheelchair. You were in a walker. How difficult was that time, or did you feel like you were in a place where, all right, I've got a goal and I can kind of move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I definitely kind of took the what's next mindset, just that 1% better each and every day. With that being, how can I get out of this hospital? Or when's my next surgery? How can we finish surgeries? And then after everything was complete with the surgeries, it was, how can I get out of this wheelchair? How can I get off this walker onto crutches? And then once I got my prosthetic, it was, how can I be fully weight-bearing on it? Because there was a period of time at first of my prosthetic not fitting very well, just because it's a very tedious process. So if it's not the exact fit, then it's not very comfortable at all. So there was a time where it wasn't comfortable, and then in March or in 2023 is the first time I was fully weight-bearing on my leg. And from there, it was just like, hey, how can I get back onto the field? And then first we worked on my swing, and then speed, and then all that good stuff afterwards.
I'm more like your dad, where moments and emotions, I can picture what's happening. So when you step into the cage for the first time on two legs, ready to take a swing, your dad, I guess he's throwing a pitch to you?
Yeah, it was probably a ball.
But what was that moment like for you?
It was awesome, just because there was a lot of preparation just to get back to that moment. With me just hitting on a shower stool, one-handed drills, to me just watching a ball off a machine, just seeing that velocity again. But seeing Dad throw a live arm, I don't think I would ever be happy to see that. But I was definitely a lot of emotions at that moment.
The first time you dressed in the uniform and were able to get back on the field, what about that?
It was awesome. I think it was February 16th was my first game back. So it was definitely a lot of emotions. And Coach Godwin told me before the game, like, hey, if we get ahead by a comfortable lead, just be ready to hit. And thankfully we did.
And again, another big time moment, walking up to the plate. For you, probably it's like, yeah, of course, this is what I'm supposed to be doing,
Yeah,
right?
Right.
But for your parents who were in the crowd and all these people that had been praying for you, that was a surreal thing. And it went viral, it went worldwide. People were watching this happen, and what an inspiration it was for people. But what did it mean to you?
I mean, it was just a powerful moment. Just to prove people that I'm still here, I'm still Parker, I'm still a baseball player. Just even though difficult things happen in life and adversity hits you, doesn't mean just to give up. Because if you just continue to work hard, then his plan is greater than ours. But I mean, people really didn't see all the recovery and stuff. So I think it was just awesome for people to finally see me back and see me back onto the field, and to prove people wrong and prove people right. Just my believers that believed in me, and the people that were there the whole time, my PTs, coaches, teammates. I mean, it was just really for them, and just because they've supported me the whole time, and just to show people that God's mercy is there for us.
Your path is still the same path, but it's taken a detour. It's gone a different way than
Definitely.
you anticipated. but maybe, maybe it's something bigger than you had ever imagined.
Definitely.
When you see kids who are coming to the game because of you, what does that mean to you?
It's surreal, honestly. Just that I get to be able to have this platform just to share God's light and just hope for people. With that being them losing a leg or going through a divorce, whatever it is. But just seeing amputee kids at the games now, I mean, it's just really cool to see, and just hearing stories like people getting back into sports even though they thought that they couldn't previously, and seeing me just walk up to the plate, not swing the bat once, but just walk up to the plate, just giving them hope to just get back into life, just get back into the game of life. I think that's the biggest thing, and that's honestly what I'm here for, is just to share His light and share His mercy and just show people that, hey, it's bigger than baseball, that God's there for you no matter what you're going through.
When I hear about some of those stories, and you talked about when you were younger, your faith, you were a believer, but maybe it wasn't as real to you then as it is now. What have you learned over the course of your accident and where you're at today?
That God's always there, that even in your darkest times or in the valley, that He's still working. You may not see it at the time, and it may be very foggy to you at the time, but that His mercy is still there, that He still has a plan for you, that He's giving you that trial just so you can lean closer to Him and realize that He is the true way. I would say that I realize that His plan is greater than mine, because I thought I had my whole life planned out, go to college and go to the MLB and just be a great baseball player, but life's much bigger than just baseball.
What does the future hold for you?
I would say public speaking, more baseball and Paralympics. I just love speaking to people now just about His mercy and just showing them that, hey, I'm still here. Just telling them what happened to me, how He has protected me, how His plan has been absolutely phenomenal. And even though at one point in my life I had no idea what His plan was for me, but kind of still living His plan, but kind of outside of the trials for time being. But just showing them that, hey, He's awesome.
I spent time with the Byrd family and came away so blessed for it. Parker's response to his accident, to a complete upheaval of his life, was handled with such grace and such resolve because he trusted God. I can't honestly say that would have been my response if something similar had happened to me. Parker's doing some great work as he finishes up his career at ECU, and God has some big things in store for him. So go and give him a follow on social media at Parker Byrd D. That's Parker BYRD with an extra D. Parker, God bless you, brother. We're praying for you, Jeff and Mitzi, as well. We appreciate your hospitality. And if you enjoyed this podcast, we ask that you would share it with a friend, a family member, or a coworker. And our goal is to reach the world with the gospel through sports. We'll see you next week.